right. So I'm a super applied guy. I kind of look at things and think, okay, how can I add this Lego, add that Lego, and clip them together and build something with it? And right now, if you look back in computer science history, when you look at the kinds of things that were being done in 1970, right after computing was invented, the microprocessors were invented, people were doing research like, how do I sort a list of numbers? And that was meaningful work, and importantly, it was work that's accessible to everybody, because nobody knows what we can build with this new kind of oil, this new kind of electricity, this new kind of unit of computation we've created, and anything was game, and anybody could participate in that game to figure it out. And I think one of the really exciting things about GPT right now is, yes, in and of itself, it's amazing. But then, what could we do with it if we call it over and over again, if we build it into our algorithms and start to build it into broader software? So the world really is yours to figure out those fundamental questions about what could you do if you could script computation itself over and over again in the way that computers can do. Not just talk with it, but build things atop it. So we're a hosting company. We host apps. And these are just some of the things that we see. I'm going to show you demos of this with code and try to explain some of the thought process. But I wanted to give you a high-level overview of, you've probably seen these on Twitter, but kind of when it all sorts out to the top, these are some of the things that we're seeing built and deployed with language models today. Companionship, that's everything from I need a friend to I need a friend with a purpose. I want a coach. I want somebody to tell me, go to the gym and do these exercises. I want somebody to help me study a foreign language. Question answering, this is a big one. This is everything from your newsroom, having a Slack bot that helps assist you. Does this article conform to the style guidelines of our newsroom, all the way through to, I need help on my homework, or hey, I have some questions that I want you to ask Wikipedia, combine it with something else, synthesize the answer, and give it to me. Utility functions. I would describe this as there's a large set of things for which human beings can do them if only, or computers could do them if only they had access to language computation, language knowledge. An example of this would be, read every tweet on Twitter, tell me the ones I should read. That way I only get to read the ones that actually make sense to me and I don't have to skim through the rest. Creativity, image generation, text generation, storytelling, proposing other ways to do things. And then these wild experiments in kind of baby AGI, as people are calling them, in which the AI itself decides what to do and is self-directed. So I'll show you examples of many of these and what the code looks like. And if I were you, I would think about these as categories within which to both think about what you might build and then also seek out starter projects for how you might go about building them online. All right, so I'm just going to dive straight into demos and code for some of these, because I know that's what's interesting to see as fellow builders, with a high-level diagram for some of these as to how it works. So approximately, you can think of a companionship bot as a friend that has a purpose to you. And there are many ways to build all of these things, but one of the ways you can build this is simply to wrap GPT or a language model in an endpoint that additionally injects into the prompt some particular perspective or some particular goal that you want to use. It really is that easy in a way, but it's also very hard because you need to iterate and engineer the prompt so that it consistently performs the way you want it to perform. So a good example of this is something somebody built in the hackathon yesterday, and I just wanted to show you the project that they built. It was a Mandarin idiom coach, and I'll show you what the code looked like first. I'll show you the demo first. I think I already pulled it up. Here we go. So the buddy that this person wanted to create was a friend that if you gave it a particular problem you were having, it would pick a Chinese idiom, a 4-character chengyu, that described poetically, like here's a particular way you could say this, and it would tell it to her. So that the person who built this was studying Chinese and she wanted to learn more about it. So I might say something like, I'm feeling very sad, and it would think a little bit. And if everything's up and running, it will generate one of these 4-character phrases, and it will respond to it with an example. Now, I don't know if this is correct or not. So if somebody can call me out if this is actually incorrect, you please call me out. And it will then finish up with something encouraging, saying, hey, you can do it. I know this is hard. Keep going. So let me show you how they built this. And I pulled up the code right here. So this was the particular starter replet that folks were using in the hackathon yesterday. And we pulled things up into basically, you have a wrapper around GPT. And there's many things you could do, but we're going to make it easy for you to do two things. One of them is to inject some personality into the prompt. And I'll explain what that prompt is in a second. And then the second is add tools that might go out and do a particular thing. Search the web, or generate an image, or add something to a database, or fetch something from a database. So having done that, now you have something more than GPT. Now you have GPT, which we all know what it is and how we can interact with it, but you've also added a particular lens through which it's talking to you and potentially some tools. So this particular Chinese tutor, all it took to build that was 4 lines. So here's a question that I think is frying the minds of everybody in the industry right now. So is this something that we'll all do casually? And nobody really knows. Will we just all say in the future to the LLM, hey, for the next 5 minutes, please talk like a teacher? And maybe. But also, definitely in the meantime, and maybe in the future, it makes sense to wrap up these personalized endpoints so that when I'm talking to GPT, I'm not just talking to GPT. I have a whole army of different buddies, of different companions that I can talk to. They're kind of human and kind of talk to me interactively, but because I've preloaded them with, hey, by the way, you, particular, I want you to be a kind, helpful Chinese teacher that responds to every situation by explaining the Chengyu that fits it. Speak in English and explain the Chengyu and its meaning. Then provide a note of encouragement about learning language. And so just adding something like that, even if you're a non-programmer, you can just type deploy, and it'll pop it up to the web. It'll take it over to a Telegram bot that then you can even interact with, hey, I'm feeling too busy, and interact with it over Telegram, over the web. And this is the kind of thing that's now within reach for everybody from a CS 101 grad, sorry, I'm using the general purpose framing, all the way through to professionals in the industry that you can do just with a little bit of manipulation on top of sort of this raw unit of conversation and intelligence. So companionship is one of the first common types of apps that we're seeing. So a second kind of app that we're seeing, and this blew up, if for those of you who are on kind of Twitter followers, this blew up, I think, the last few months, is question answering. And I want to unpack a couple of different ways this can work, because I know many of you have probably already tried to build some of these kinds of apps. There's a couple of different ways that it works. The general framework is a user queries GPT, and maybe it has general purpose knowledge, maybe it doesn't have general purpose knowledge, but what you want it to say back to you is something specific about an article you wrote, or something specific about your course syllabus, or something specific about a particular set of documents from the United Nations on a particular topic. And so what you're really seeking is what we all hoped the customer service bot would be. Like, we've all interacted with these customer service bots, and we're kind of smashing our heads on the keyboard as we do it. But pretty soon, we're going to start to see very high fidelity bots that interact with us comfortably. And this is approximately how to do it as an engineer. So here's your game plan as an engineer. Step 1, take the documents that you want it to respond to. Step 2, cut them up. Now, if you're an engineer, this is going to madden you. You don't cut them up in a way that you would hope. For example, you could cut them up into clean sentences or clean paragraphs, or semantically coherent sections, and that would be really nice. Honestly, the way that most folks do it, and this is a simplification that tends to be just fine, is you have a sliding window that goes over the document, and you just pull out fragments of text. Having pulled out those fragments of text, you turn them into something called an embedding vector. So an embedding vector is a list of numbers that approximate some point of meaning. So you've already all dealt with embedding vectors yourself in regular life, and the reason you have, and I know you have, is because everybody's ordered food from Yelp before. So when you order food from Yelp, you look at what genre of restaurant is it? Is it a pizza restaurant? Is it an Italian restaurant? Is it a Korean barbecue place? You look at how many stars does it have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You look at where is it? So all of these you can think of as points in space, dimensions in space. Korean barbecue restaurant, 4 stars near my house. That's a 3 number vector. That's all this is. So this is a 1,000 number vector or a 10,000 number vector. Different models produce different size vectors. All it is chunking pieces of text, turning it into a vector that approximates meaning, and then you put it in something called a vector database. And a vector database is just a database that stores numbers. But having that database, now when I ask a question, I can search the database and I can say, hey, the question was, what does CS50 teach? What pieces of text in the database have vectors similar to to the question, what does CS50 teach? And there's all sorts of tricks and empires being made on refinements of this general approach. But at the end, you, the developer, model it simply as thus. And then when you have your query, you embed it, you find the document fragments, and then you put them into a prompt. And now we're just back to the personality, the companionship bot. Now it's just a prompt. And the prompt is, you're an expert in answering questions. Please answer user-provided question using source documents, results from the database. That's it. So after all of these decades of engineering of these customer service bots, it turns out with a couple of lines of code, you can build this. So let me show you. I made one just before the class with the CS50 syllabus. So we can pull that up. And I can say, I added the PDF right here. So I searched, apologies, I don't know if it's an accurate or recent syllabus. I just searched the web for CS50 syllabus PDF. I put the URL in here. It loaded it into here. This is just like a 100-line piece of code deployed that will now let me talk to it. And I can say, what will CS50 teach me? So under the hood now, what's happening is exactly what that slide just showed you. It takes that question, what will CS50 teach me? It turns it into a vector. That vector approximates, without exactly representing, the meaning of that question. It looks into a vector database that Steamship hosts of fragments from that PDF, and then it pulls out a document and then passes it to a prompt that says, hey, you're an expert at answering questions. Someone has asked you, what does CS50 teach? Please answer it using only the source documents and source materials I've provided. Now, those source materials are dynamically loaded into the prompt. It's just basic prompt engineering. And I want to keep harping back onto that. What's amazing about right now as builders is that so many things just boil down to very creative, tactical rearrangement of prompts and then using those over and over again in an algorithm and putting that into software. So the result, and again, it could be lying, it could be making things up, it could be hallucinating, is CS50 will teach students how to think algorithmically and solve problems efficiently, focusing on topics such as abstraction, ... And then it returns the source document from which it was found. So this is another big category of which there are tons of potential applications because you can repeat for each context. You can create arbitrarily many of these once it's software, because once it's software, you can just repeat it over and over again. So for your dorm, for your club, for your Slack, for your Telegram, you can start to begin putting pieces of information in and then responding to it. And it doesn't have to be documents. You can also load it straight into the prompt. I think I have it pulled up here. And if I don't, I'll just skip it. Oh, here we go. One other way you can do question answering, because I think it's healthy to always encourage the simplest possible approach to something. You don't need to engineer this giant system. It's great to have a database. It's great to use embeddings. It's great to use this big approach. It's fancy, it scales. You can do a lot of things. But you can also get away with a lot by just pushing it all into a prompt. And as an engineer, Ines, one of our team who's here, always says, like, engineers should aspire to be lazy. And I couldn't agree more. You, as an engineer, should want to set yourself up so that you can pursue the lazy path to something. So here's how you might do the equivalent of a question answering system with a prompt alone. Let's say you have 30 friends, and each friend is good at a particular thing, or you can, this is isomorphic to many other problems. You can simply just say, hey, I know certain things. Here's the things I know. A user's going to ask me something. How should we respond? And then you load that into an agent. That agent has access to GPT. You can ship deploy it. And now you've got a bot that you can connect to Telegram, you can connect to Slack. And that bot, now it won't always give you the right answer, because at a certain level we can't control the variance of the model underneath. But it will tend to answer with respect to this list. And the degree to which it tends to is to a certain extent something that both industry is working on to just give everybody as a capacity, but also you doing prompt engineering to tighten up the error bars on it. So I'll show you just a few more examples, and then in about 8 minutes, I'll turn it over to questions, because I'm sure you've got a lot about how to build things. So just to give you a sense of where we are. This is one, I don't have a demo for you, but if you were to come to me and you were to say, Ted, I want a weekend hustle, man. What should I build? Holy moly. there are a set of applications that I would describe as utility functions. I don't like that name because it doesn't sound exciting, and this is really exciting. And it's low-hanging fruits that automate tasks that require basic language understanding. So examples for this are generate a unit test. I don't know how many of you have ever been writing tests and you're just like, oh, come on, I can get through this. I can get through this. If you're a person who likes writing tests, you're a lucky individual. Looking up the documentation for a function, rewriting a function, making something conform to your company guidelines, doing a brand check. All of these things are things that are kind of relatively context-free operations or scoped context operations on a piece of information that requires linguistic understanding. And really, you can think of them as something that is now available to you as a software builder, as a weekend project builder, as a startup builder. And you just have to build the interface around it and present it to other people in a context in which it's meaningful for them to consume. And so the space of this is extraordinary. I mean, it's the space of all human endeavor now with this new tool, I think is the way to think about it. People often joke about how when you're building a company, when you're building a project, you don't want to start with the hammer because you want to start with the problem instead. And it's generally true, but my God, like we've just got a really cool new hammer. And to a certain extent, I would encourage you to at least casually on the weekends run around and hit stuff with it and see what can happen from a builder's, from a tinkerer's, from an experimentalist's point of view. And then the final one is creativity. This is another huge mega app. Now, I'm primarily live in the text world, and so I'm going to talk about text-based things. I think so far this has mostly been growing in the imagery world because we're such visual creatures, and the images you can generate are just staggering with AI. It certainly brings up a lot of questions, too, around IP and artistic style. But the template for this, if you're a builder, that we're seeing in the wild is approximately the following. And the thing I want to point out is domain knowledge here. This is really the purpose of this slide, is to touch on the importance of the domain knowledge. So many people approximately find the creative process as follows. Come up with a big idea, over-generate possibilities, edit down what you over-generated, repeat. Right? Like anybody who's been a writer knows when you write way too much, and then you have to delete lots of it. And then you revise and you write way too much, and you have to delete lots of it. This particular task is fantastic for AI. One of the reasons it's fantastic for AI is because it allows the AI to be wrong. You've pre-agreed you're going to delete lots of it. And so if you pre-agree, hey, I'm just going to generate 5 possibilities of the story I might tell, 5 possibilities of the advertising headline, 5 possibilities of what I might write my thesis on. You pre-agreed, it's okay if it's a little wrong because you are going to be the editor that steps in. And here's the thing that you really should bring to the table is don't think about this as a technical activity. Think about this as your opportunity not to put GPT in charge. Instead, for you to grasp the steering wheel tighter, I think at least, in Python or the language you're using to program because you have the domain knowledge to wield GPT in the generation of those. So let me show you an example of what I mean by that. So this is a cool app that someone created for the Writing Atlas project. So Writing Atlas is a set of short stories. And you can think of it as Goodreads for short stories. So you can go in here, you can browse different stories. And this was something somebody created where you can type in a story description that you like. And this is going to take about a minute to generate, so I'm going to talk while it's generating. And while it's working, what it's doing, and I'll show you the code in a second, is it's searching through the collection of stories for similar stories. And here's where the domain knowledge part comes in. Then it uses GPT to look at what it was that you wanted and use knowledge of how an editor, how a bookseller thinks to generate a set of suggestions specifically through the lens of that perspective with the goal of writing that beautiful handwritten note that we sometimes see in a local bookstore tacked on underneath a book. And so it doesn't just say, hey, you might like this, here's a general purpose reason why you might like this, but specifically, here's why you might like this with respect to what you gave it. It's either stalling out or it's taking a long time. Oh, there we go. So here's its suggestions. And in particular, these are things that only a human could know, at least for now. 2 humans specifically. The human who said they wanted to read a story, that's the text that came in, and then the human who added domain knowledge to script a sequence of interactions with the language model so that you could provide very targeted reasoning over something that was informed by that domain knowledge. So for these utility apps, bring your domain knowledge. Let me actually show you how this looks in code, because I think it's useful to see how simple and accessible this is. This is really a set of prompts. So why might they like a particular location? Well, here's the prompt that did that. This is an open source project. And it has a bunch of examples, and then it says, well, here's the one that we're interested in. Here's the audience. Here's a couple of examples of why might people like a particular thing in terms of audience. It's just another prompt. Same for topic, same for explanation. And if you go down here and look at how it was done, suggesting the story is, what is this? Line 174 to line 203. It really is, and again, like over and over again, I want to impress upon you, this really is within reach. It's really just, what, 20-odd lines of step 1, search in the database for similar stories. Step 2, given that I have similar stories, pull out the data. Step 3, with my domain knowledge in Python, now run these prompts. Step 4, prepare that into an output. So the thing we're scripting itself is some approximation of human cognition, if you're willing to go there metaphorically. We're not sure. I'm not going to weigh in on where we are on the is OpenAI a life form argument. All right, one kind of really far out there thing, and then I'll tie it up for questions, because I know there's probably a lot, and I also want to make sure you get great pizza in your bellies. And that is Baby AGI, AutoGPT is what you might have heard them called on Twitter. I think of them as multi-step planning bots. So everything I showed you so far was approximately one-shot interactions with GPT. So this is, the user says they want something, and then either Python mediates interactions with GPT, or GPT itself does some things with the inflection of a personality that you've added from some prompt engineering. Really useful, pretty easy to control. If you want to go to production, if you want to build a weekend project, if you want to build a company, that's a great way to do it right now. This is wild. And if you haven't seen this stuff on Twitter, I would definitely recommend going to search for it. This is what happens, the simple way to put it is, if you put GPT in a for loop. If you let GPT talk to itself and then tell itself what to do. So it's an emergent behavior. And like all emergent behaviors, it starts with a few simple steps. Like Conway's game of life, many elements of reality turn out to be math equations that fit on a t-shirt, but then when you play them forward in time, they generate DNA, or they generate human life. So this is approximately step 1, take a human objective. Step 2, your first task is to write yourself a list of steps. And here's the critical part, repeat. Now do the list of steps. Now you have to embody your agent with the ability to do things. So it's really only limited to do what you give it the tools to do and what it has the skills to do. So obviously this is still very much a set of experiments that are running right now. But it's something that we'll see unfold over the coming years. And this is the scenario in which Python stops becoming so important, because we've given it the ability to actually self-direct what it's doing. And then it finally gives you a result. And I want to give you an example still of just, again, impressing upon you how much of this is prompt engineering, which is wild, how little code this is. Let me show you what Baby AGI looks like. So here is a Baby AGI that you can connect to Telegram. And this is an agent that has 2 tools. So I haven't explained to you what an agent is. I haven't explained to you what tools are. I'll give you a quick one-sentence description. An agent is just a word to mean GPT plus some bigger body in which it's living. Maybe that body has a personality. Maybe it has tools. Maybe it has Python mediating its experience with other things. Tools are simply ways in which the agent can choose to do things. Like imagine if GPT could say, order a pizza. And instead of you seeing the text, order a pizza, that caused the pizza to be ordered. That's a tool. So these are 2 tools it has. One tool is generate a to-do list. One tool is do a search on the web. And then down here, it has a a prompt saying, hey, your goal is to build a task list and then do that task list. And then this is just placed into a harness that does it over and over again. So after the next task, kind of unqueue the results of that task and keep it going. And so in doing that, you get this kick-started loop where essentially you kickstart it and then the agent is talking to itself. So this, unless I'm wrong, I don't think this has yet reached production in terms of what we're seeing in the field of how people are deploying software. But if you want to dive into sort of the wildest part of experimentation, this is definitely one of the places you can start, and it's really within reach. All you have to do is download one of the starter projects for it, and you can kind of see right in the prompting, here's how you kickstart that process of iteration. All right, so I know that was super high level. I hope it was useful. It's, I think, from the field, from the bottoms up, what we're seeing and what people are building, kind of this high-level categories of apps that people are making. All of these apps are apps that are within reach to everybody, which is really, really exciting. And I suggest Twitter is a great place to hang out and build things. There's a lot of AI builders on Twitter publishing.